This is a huge win, isn't it, from Mikel Arteta's side?
Grella was looking the other way. It's been a long day for her.
You're quick, Jeff. You were there a second ago.
Yeah, it's that movement off the ball. It's always been one of my strengths, hasn't it?
You know what he's doing, Jeff? He's still thinking about that food you had earlier. How did it go, by the way, your food tour in the Emirates?
The food tour was great, but to be honest with you, Arsenal nearly made a meal of this, and they threatened to choke at one point on the game because they were 2-0 up and cruising. There was absolutely no sign whatsoever of Leicester City being in this game. Half-time, I think they had one touch in the opposition box. Arsenal was so in control. And at half-time, I don't know what happened. It's as though Arsenal went to sleep and Leicester City woke up. All of a sudden, it's 2-2, and the possibility of making up that ground on Manchester City had gone. And I think what's really interesting is the way that Arsenal dealt with it. I've just been listening to Mikel Arteta in the press conference here, and he was absolutely beaming. He said, look, without doubt, it was worrying, but he said, I loved the way that we dealt with it emotionally. There was too much emotion, but we carried on doing the right things. We carried on playing the football. And, of course, 4-2 looks a comfortable scoreline in the end, but nowhere near tells the story. So he pretty much confirmed he loved the way they won almost more than if it had been a routine victory. I'm not so sure that the Arsenal supporters would agree with that, but I kind of get where he's coming from.
Jeff, as you know, no two seasons are ever the same. Can you talk us what the atmosphere was like when it was 2-2? Because obviously we know what's at stake for Arsenal, City dropping points earlier on. What was it like from the fans' perspective and the atmosphere that they created for the players?
Well, as you can imagine, Nigel, it was tense, it was nervy, it was fraught, and the thought that they'd thrown it away. But it was different, though. They weren't on their backs. They were supporting them the whole time. They were right behind the team. There was a very subtle difference between them being desperate and the fans believed. The teams believed and the fans believed. I think that was the difference. So you've played in games, Nigel, where it's like that, and you could feel the pressure coming down from the stands. That wasn't the case. Yes, they were urging them. Yes, they were worried about what might potentially have happened here, to toss away this potential, clawing back what could be huge 2 points in the title race. But there wasn't a desperation about it at all. There was no sense of, we've blown it early on. Not at all. They were right behind them. And I think that was reflected in the Arsenal performance as well.
What's the belief level like in England, in the country, about Arsenal actually being able to do it? Because I know that they can, and I know the tide has shifted, and people will say that Arsenal could go on and beat Manchester City. But then games like today, a draw for Manchester, Arsenal coming back and winning in this way. What's the pulse like over there?
Well, interestingly enough, tonight, that Arsenal have usurped Manchester City, have now been installed by the bookmakers as favourites to lift the Premier League title. That happened this evening after the final result. Now, I was quite surprised by that. That's a significant shift when you think about it, because Liverpool and Aston Villa, they can both go past them with their results. So the fact that the bookmakers, who are often fairly wise judges in these things, have installed Arsenal as favourites, I think that shows that the belief isn't just here at the Emirates, but also in the wider world of football too.
Wow. Jeff, I think it's so different when you get to go to the match and see the atmosphere and also see guys and what they're doing off the ball, and they lose a little bit control of the game today, like you say, in the second half, come out sleeping. How big of a miss in those moments is Odegaard, where they kind of do lose sort of moments in the game? How big of a miss is Odegaard for them?
Yeah, he's a hugely important player for them. He carries the way the team fight. He carries them forwards, if you like. He's the first to close down. He's an extremely creative player. But if they can get through this run of games without him, I think that is a huge credit to them as well. Interesting enough as well, Nigel and I spoke before the game. We were talking about the pick of the youngsters. I mean, Waneri, when he came on, my word, 18 years of age, comes on and he demands the ball. He beat 2 or 3 players and took a shot from 25 yards. Now, he's got to be pushing for a starting place, possibly in place of Thomas Partey. But I think, again, Arsenal have showed the depth of squad they have right now. So, yes, Odegaard, huge player, but they're showing that they can live without him.
Speaking of that depth, Jeff, how do you see Arsenal doing in the Champions League? Not only this week against PSG, because obviously that's a really big match they've obviously got coming up, but they made it all the way to the quarter-final last season. Do you think that the attention to the Premier League title race is going to be even more this season than the effort they put into European competition last?
It's funny, probably, because just now when Mikel Arteta was put to him, you know, how aware were you that City had dropped 2 points today? You couldn't afford to give it up. Could it have been, you know, an absolute disaster if you hadn't made up that ground, especially after winning 2-0? Mikel Arteta said, look, I understand, and yes, of course, we want to win every game, but it is only September. We've only played 6 games. But I think that really underlines, if you like, the intensity that there is around this Premier League title race this early in the season. Champions League, I think, is slightly different because I think we're all getting used to this new format, aren't we? We're not quite sure what results mean early on, and also you don't play the same team away from home. But to answer your question more specifically, yes, I think there is the desire there to go further. They are a better team. They've progressed this season, no question about that. They're building on the back of last season, and they do have more depth in their squad as well. They've got players coming back as well. So I think they'll be able to cope with it, and I think they want to go far. It's just the games are coming thick and fast. But Arsenal also in a run of games at home as well, because they play Bolton in the week. Today they've got PSG, then at Southampton, home again next week as well. So if they can make that advantage count, then that will stand them in good stead as we start to get into the winter months.
Jeff, obviously being there and having the eye test to watch that game, Steve Cooper's under a lot of pressure already at Leicester. From what you saw today from them, their performances, do you think that just adds more pressure to his position right now?
Depends which Leicester performance you talk about, Nigel. Genuinely, in the first half, I couldn't tell you what they were doing. They didn't press, they didn't get physical, they didn't try and take Arsenal on at football. They just offered absolutely nothing. They were a pale imitation of a Steve Cooper coach side. Now, you know he's a good coach. Second half, he obviously had words with them at half-time. I don't know what he said, but it really worked. They took the game to Arsenal. They scored quickly. They chased up. They harried. They hustled. They created. And they were a threat. They were a threat on the break as well. So, look, I think today for Leicester City fans, they didn't expect anything from today, but they'll have seen signs that there is something there. And look, when you haven't won a game, you're going to be under pressure, aren't you? Of course you are, until that first victory comes. But if I was a Leicester City fan tonight, I'd be encouraged by that second half display. I'd be slightly worried about the first half, but the second half display was decent. They played some decent football as well. So hopefully it'll get a chance and that win will come, but it can't come soon enough.
They showed glimpses, didn't they? Good stuff, Jeff. Good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us. We enjoyed your walk and talk earlier.
Yeah, that's my exercise for the weekend, so I'm off down the pub now.
Repeat it, very clear. I love Pep. I admire him since he was 10 years old. I respect him profoundly. I'm so grateful for everything that did for me and continues to do with me. And I consider him a friend. I love and I respect every member of the staff there because I worked with them for 4 years. And when I say that I know them, is I know how hard they work. I haven't seen a human being work as hard as Pep and the coaches and everybody in that football club to be consistently winning. And the reason they are there is because they maintain the hunger. And this is exactly what I learned. And this is what I mean. So I cannot be any more clear than that. If you want, I can repeat it, but if someone wants to damage a relationship, that's not in my hand. But that feeling is profound. He knows it, the staff knows it, because I still maintain today with them, with the board, with the ownership, with everybody. And if not, it wouldn't be genuinely, and it is. But if someone wants to create something else, for me, the sport has to be about, there is that will to win. They have it, I have it. We have it, for sure, because we haven't done it. But they have it, even if they want it more than anybody else is. We have to learn, and this has to be inspiring for us. And it is for me. This is what I mean, that I've been there. And it's remarkable, and it's incredible achievement because they have that mentality. Hopefully that's clear.
This one, Arsenal 2-0 up and cruising. Then it was 2-2. James Justin, who, by the way, brought in double Arsenal defence on his Fantasy Premier League wildcard. He benched himself So not only does he lose his points for scoring twice, but he's ruined his defence by scoring twice against the 2 Arsenal players that he brought in. But that's fantasy. It's not real life. This was an Arsenal 2-0 up and cruising, won by 2 goals, Janusz. That doesn't really tell the full story, though, does it? How big a win is this for the Gunners? And what does it say, once again, about the late show under Mikel Arteta?
Look, you know, this team, Arsenal, is learning how to, you know, how to suffer and win. And that's big for me, right? I'm not going to, you know, yeah, it's easy to look for faults in this performance. I don't really know how to, especially because they saw it through. Because at first, I saw a team that looked worthy of champions, right, in the first half. I mean, absolute control. I think they completed like 93 or 95% for the 94% of the passes. And then after that, it's, you know, I wrote it down. This is how you lose the Premier League, you know, when it was 2-2, but for no particular reason whatsoever, rather than sloppiness. And they saw it through. I mean, still absolutely dominated. I think, you know, the set piece right after halftime. Okay, I mean, Arsenal should know better, right? Because they score plenty of set pieces themselves. So very sloppy on the second half. But, you know, I'm you know, not a bias here, but I'm glad they won it, because I wouldn't have wanted to explain to everybody why they lost it, because there was absolutely zero reason for that, because that was, to me, a total domination. And as I said, if suffering was the case against Manchester City with 10 men and getting it done, which, by the way they did it, they had it done, I have zero problems with that. Today, it kind of, if I were Arteta, it would even put more smile on my faces, because that's another different way of showing the character and spine.
Yeah, I mean, the character's the perfect word that Janusz has used, LME. It took me back to a goal by Reece Nelson, like in the 800th minute of stoppage time back in the day. But good teams find a way, and Arsenal did. How did they avoid being in that position? The second goal's a worldie from James Justin, but the first one's a bit scrappy. Was it complacency? What was it that led Arsenal to have to scrap and do whatever they could in order to get the 3 points, having conceded those 2 goals?
Honestly, I think, like Janusz said, it was a bit of a frequency of occurrence of a fixture, because in that first half, Arsenal could have kept going and going and going, and these things do happen. And I think Leicester, what they did well was that at the very when they were equalizing first, like you said, just the second goal from James Justin was just unbelievable. But there were also moments as well where Leicester just decided to match the ugly with what was going on the pitch, so they were able to equalize. But after that, Arsenal just kept pushing. I actually think Mikel Arteta did a really good job at introducing Ethan Nwaneri, who's just a wonderful young talent. Yeah. Raheem Sterling did his part. It was Gabriel Jesus's drive at the end that got that last goal as well. And we have to remember, this is still happening without their architect, Martin Odegaard. And that's a massive hole to fill in. And I think Arsenal did that. It wasn't a pretty game towards the end, because Leicester did equalize and they were trying to make it difficult. And the goals, specifically from Leandro Trossard to equalize as well and take the lead, was not pretty either. But just like Janusz said, you have to find a way to get victories, especially at home. It was a disappointing thing when they drew against Brighton because of the Declan Rice sending off. But here, at the very least, they made it happen. And that's what takes to make a champion. Because not every game is going to be aesthetically pleasing. It's going to be ugly sometimes. And again, it's very important to rely on your bench, especially when you miss the likes of somebody like Martin Odegaard. Mikel Merino is not available yet either as well. You know, David Raya, we didn't know exactly if he was going to start. So this is a good win. And when you look at the statistics, everything was there statistically for Arsenal. It was just taking care of business in front of goal, which is what happened. Kai Havertz, by the way, is slowly becoming a very, or not even slowly, he's already here. He's becoming a very important player for Arsenal. He's doing a lot of things for this team that Arsenal need, that they didn't have in the past as well.
I think Arsenal fans would tell you he's probably underrated outside of the football club. They know how good he is, and the Arsenal teammates know how good he is. He was actually going to be part of the next question I wanted to ask Janusz, because without Odegaard, it's a different type of setup. Usually it's Martinelli or Trossard. It's now both. He's got Havertz in an advanced position. Sometimes he's got him in a more withdrawn position. Compare and contrast this Arsenal setup, Janusz, not just in this game, without Ødegaard, compared to what we have with Arsenal when Ødegaard plays.
Oh, it's, I mean, again, I did not think that Arsenal were going to survive the way they have without Ødegaard. He's by far their most important player in every aspect of the game, and not just to the likes of Saka, who, the combinations on the right, right-hand side are superb. The 1-2 play, the playmaker who can score himself, who, by the way, does so much work defensively, can actually win a ball defensively as well. This is not just him tracking and willing to do the work of running and backtracking. He wins the ball as well. He's superb in pressing. In fact, he's usually the one that starts the press very often. So again, the fact, they're getting that much closer to Manchester City and everybody else for that matter, right? Because you look at that team, and now all of a sudden, they're getting results even without him. And this is a, pretty long period of time not being there. So I just think that everything that we've said in the past about Arsenal, maybe the lack of character, is showing in the game against Manchester City today without Ødegaard, right? Even a personality like Calafiori, certainly personality on and off the pitch, and you could see it today. Although obviously on that second goal he could have done better. Almost seemed like Calafiori was playing the third striker, where Mikel Arteta was probably maybe quietly telling him that defending may be the first option the way the game has gone. But so much is evolving with Arsenal on the plus side that it's very difficult to poke holes, because I'm honestly telling you, when Ødegaard went out and we knew it was going to be a long period of time, I thought better results will follow.
They didn't, or they haven't just yet. You chastised me earlier today, as you normally do, for some silly questions, but I suggested that the pendulum might be swinging towards Arsenal's way by way of favouritism. The UK bookies have now got them as favourites over Manchester City, Janusz. So does that make City the value play? And is it right that Arsenal are now favourites for the Premier League after today's results? I'm
not changing anything. We've seen it for Manchester City. As I said, the worst it can happen to them is that they're going to be 1 point behind. And that's with with Liverpool and Villa. Still to play. We absolutely cannot overlook Liverpool. Not at this stage. Manchester City has proven, of course, over the years that they can get it done. Villa, sorry, LME, I think they'll put up a fight, but I don't consider Villa as one of the teams that can challenge for the title.
That's okay. I agree.
Finally, to you, LME, we've seen from Leicester this season, especially the Spurs game, when they could have been 5 or 6 down at halftime. They end up getting a point from that game. Today, their expected goals, and I'm not a big fan of that, but their expected goals was something like 0.27, and they ended up getting 2 goals from it. Steve Cooper looks like he can make a lot out of a little in this league. So out of Leicester and out of Ipswich and out of Southampton, the 3 teams that came up, where would you say Leicester are placed out of those 3 as far as chances of staying up, because they can make a lot out of a little?
It's really difficult, because I see all 3 going back down, just because the difference between, we've talked about this before, right? The difference between the promoted teams to everybody else is so big. I think that Leicester, I would probably put them out of those 3 at the ones the closest that could maybe escape it, only because it really depends on, one, what you just said, which is just make it sticky against teams that are far better than you, and B, your home form. If you can do something at home, get some victories, especially around against the teams that are around you, then maybe something can happen. I mean, we still have to wait and see how Wolves are going to continue to do this, because, they have their own issues. Everton obviously got a victory today, but they're still suffering. But those 3 promoted teams, I think, are going to go back down. Leicester possibly with the best option, just because of also the experience that Steve Cooper has as well in this division. But everything depends on home form. Everything. You have to try and get anything that you can when you're at home.
The other games today, Brentford drawing 1-1 with West Ham, scoring, I think, inside a minute for the third game in a row, which is a Premier League record. Everton getting that win at home against Palace, having gone a goal down, and Fulham with a win after VAR told the referee to have another look at an incident inside the box. A penalty was awarded and it was put home.
The return of Raul Jimenez,
Jimenez, indeed. So that's what we've had so far. Wolves-Liverpool still to come. We'll be back straight after that game for a full recap of what's happened at Molineux. But it's been some days so far. 4 for Cole, but Arsenal get the same, but they left it late. Bye for now.